Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Recruiters with No Limits. Always live and never scripted, here with my sidekick and co-host, John Ruffini. Johnny, what's up, brother?
Good day, sir.
Good day, man. You guys still recuperating from the Super Bowl or what? But before we even start, John, you know what I'm going to throw up here, man. One of the commercials. We got to talk about it real quick, brother. You ready for this?
Which one you throwing up? Oh, yeah.
Come on, man.
The Workday commercial was one of my favorites. I'm a closet Kiss fan from way back. So I thought that was pretty fun.
The Kiss Army. I mean, everybody in it. I got to tell you, the storyline, the punchline, and just bringing all them rockers together was amazing.
Pretty creative. That's for sure.
It was awesome. So shout out to Workday. Okay, Johnny, you ready, man? Can we do a drum roll here? We got Mr. California, Lou Adler in the house. What's up, Lou?
Happy to be here. And God, I'm still thinking about Super Bowl, but not that commercial, that's for sure. But let's go on with something more important.
It was a great game.
Lou, before we jump into everything, Lou, just tell a little bit about, I mean, you've been around you're like one of the rock stars yourself, man. I mean, you've been around for years. Just give us a little bit of a 2-minute tour of what you're all about.
Well, let's say this. So when I started as a recruiter, which was before everyone on this call was born, which was in 1978, I'd actually worked for a living prior to that. But I hated my boss, so I quit. I was running a manufacturing company. And when I became a recruiter, I realized it was totally screwed up. People didn't know what they were doing. And I'm not going to contend 44 or 5 years later, they still don't know what they're doing. So let's just leave it at that. Is my first search assignment was in 1978, probably done 600 to 800 after that. And people say, is things getting better? I said, no, they're getting worse. So we'll talk about why and what you can do to change that whole attitude. So let's leave it at that.
Excellent. So I'll dive right into that, Lou. So how has it gotten worse? Because I know that you've seen, we've all seen evolutions in different eras of, recruiters and generations of recruiters. What are some of the biggest differences now versus then, so to speak?
Okay, so let's and that's a really good question. If I had to just look at the super theme, it was hard to change jobs in 1978. You really had to work hard when you wanted. If you got aggravated in one day, you couldn't go find another job. If you got aggravated, it would take you 2 to 3 weeks sending emails, finding job postings, 2 to 3 weeks before you could even get an interview and send an email or a resume out to somebody. So by that time, any short-term problems you had were dissipated. Now I can deal with this. Now you have a short-term problem that could normally, you got aggravated with your boss, you had to work overtime, problem went down. You didn't quit because of those stupid you quit for real reasons. You weren't getting paid enough. The job didn't have a good career trajectory. So in the olden days, before the internet, it was hard to change jobs and you had to be serious about doing it. And when you decided to apply or interview, companies spent a lot of time because they didn't have hundreds of candidates. They had half a dozen or a dozen candidates. So it was much more personal on both sides of the table. Now it's impersonal. You quit, you're aggravated, you quit jobs, you're quiet quitting, whoever pays the most. So it's a much more transactional, impersonal approach right now. And technology does all this mixing and matching. There's very little interpersonal skills associated with it. And candidates take short-term reasons to accept jobs based on the biggest pay package and one that's closest to home. So I think we've trivialized and cheapened work in the process. And that hasn't changed. It's gotten worse. So that's my position.
No, you summed it up real well. I got to tell you straight up. Right before I came on the show here, I had a candidate. I called. You ready for this? 3 years, took off work. I'm like, where's your gap at? I took some time off to, analyze the world. 3 years. I'm like,
3 years. That's what cow. I can take 3 weeks maybe, but 3 years, that's too much.
I hope you figured it all out.
I don't know what I'm going to do. Do a magical resume for him.
The world. We need to find out what he studied. It's interesting, Lou, and I totally agree with you that the process has totally changed. I never looked at it from the sense of, from the candidate market of how much easier and more frequently acceptable it is to change jobs today versus years ago. The career lifer with the same company, that's a lost art, and it's been lost for many years now. Why do you think it is that there is so much, there's no loyalty anymore, so to speak, to a company? If the person's not feeling like they're getting what they want, or something good pops by that seems better, they jump. Why is the lack of loyalty such an issue these
Well,
days?
let's say this. I think when I said about this transactional process, both sides are at fault. I don't want to, I
Agreed.
think companies have decided that, hey, we're just hiring people for gigs as opposed to for careers. And there's no question that, because even when I worked for a living, which was the 10 years after I graduated from college and before I became a recruiter, I had a bunch of different jobs at 3 or 4 different companies. So, and that was not looked upon as positive. However, I got promoted every 8 months, so I didn't care. But then was running a company, and I didn't like the group president, so he and I yelled and screamed at each other. Just for every time I saw him, which every other week. And so I think the idea is that companies have decided there's no loyalty, but I'm not sure whose fault it is. So I don't want to kind of blame it. I think circumstances and the internet have made it. I mean, let's kind of think about it. I remember I was at some company, it was a job board, one of the first job boards that was just starting. And they said, we're going to make it easy for candidates to apply. I said, no, make it hard to apply. Don't just get people who are incompetent to apply to a job because they're aggravated. Give them like 6 or 8 jobs a week that they could apply to, but commit that all the companies would talk to the people who applied. So they actually used it as value. The application was valuable, not cheap. So now everybody applies when they're aggravated to any job, and companies don't talk to them because they have machines and filters that pick and select who they should talk to. So it becomes very impersonal on both sides of the table. So we just hire people for short-term gig-based work, and it's unlikely, and we don't even clarify it. So it's kind of unlikely that people are going to be totally satisfied when they get the job. I mean, I'd say half to 2/3 of the people are disappointed. Oh, that's the job I accepted. And it was never the job because you didn't discuss that. You discussed the pay package and the title.
Makes sense. So, okay, Lou, so how do you change this?
Well, I change it. Well, when you kind of look at it, so let me kind of give a story, and maybe this is the way to do it. So let me give you 2 stories. My first search assignment was for a plant manager in the automotive industry, and it was in Southern California, but I gave 6 months notice. So when I left, it wasn't this trivial thing, I'm going to quit and be aggravated. I was aggravated, but I thought about it for 6 months. But my first assignment was for a plant manager in the automotive industry. And the job description this is 1978. The job description was pretty traditional. 10 years of this, 5 years of this, a background in engineering, this kind of manufacturing background, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Good personality, all that stuff, which is no different than it is today. I looked at that job description and said, that's not a job description, that's a person description. I said, a job doesn't have skills, experience, and academics, a person does. Let's put this in the parking lot. What does a person need to do to be successful? And the president said, turn around the plant. So we figured out what it would take to turn around the plant. We hired somebody who could do that work. So now let me go fast forward about 10 years after that, approximately. And it was a different job. It was an electronics facility. But the candidate told me on Monday that he was going to accept my offer then this was I think it was an additional plant. I did a lot of work in manufacturing, another plant manager position. And he told me on Monday he was going to take the offer. I was a contingency recruiter. So this would have been today's dollars, $150,000 to $200,000. My fee would have been $50,000. That's a lot of money then. Well, it's different salary, but nonetheless it was equivalent to that. And this was a contingency. I wouldn't have got it if he didn't take it, but he told me on Monday he was going to take it. So I'm spending the money by Wednesday. Wednesday he calls me and says, I'm not taking the job. So I just lost $50,000. I mean, literally lost it. And I'm just crushed. After he told me why, I just said this to him. And it's the first time I ever said it. He said, John, you're making a strategic decision using tactical information. Strategic decision. He said, what do you mean? I said, everything you've said, the reason you want this job is what you get on the start date. Nothing to do with the work, nothing to do with the career trajectory. And you can spend 2 to 3 years here and it was an old line industry versus a state-of-the-art electronic manufacturing facility. I said, you're going to be the same you are 3 years from now. You're going to know when you're putting yourself on a better career trajectory. I didn't think I salvaged the search assignment, but he calls me the next day and says he's going to take my job. So turned out pretty effective. But then a year later, he calls me and says that was the best career decision I ever made. He's just been made VP operations for 7 plants. They're moving into China at that time. And it was a critical move. But I think, so the answer to your question, John, is if you don't know the work you're doing, and if the job doesn't seem like a career trajectory, there's no way you can make the right decision. So in my mind, when I talk to people, as I understand the job, I understand what the career criteria is, and I let people say, no, this is going to take a lot of time to make the decision. This is a long-term career decision. It's not some transactional thing that you take it for the most money. But we as the company have to give you the information to make that long-term decision. That's our responsibility. And that's how I change it, one search at a time. It's hard to scale that. It's not totally hard. ChatGPT makes it easier to scale it, but you still have to understand the work, and you have to have candidates go through a longer assessment process. So I said, spend more time with fewer people, and you can still make your numbers in terms of time to hire and cost per hire.
Makes sense.
Great insight. Do you think it's a fair statement to say that in today's world, recruiters have gotten lazy?
100%.
No, let's say this, yes and no.
Okay.
Reality speaks. So I was on a podcast about a month ago with a woman from UK. She was a executive recruiter in the fashion industry. How she reached out to me, no knowledge, because I certainly don't know anything about fashion. But I just talked to her, and I think her name was Maria. She asked me a similar question. I said, let's be real frank, Maria. When I'm not a full-time recruiter anymore, but I certainly was it for many, many years. I could never really handle more than 6 assignments at any one time and do it justice. So if you're a corporate recruiter handling 15 to 20, all you can do is push paper. So I don't know that they're lazy. It's the fact that the way they've organized recruiting is they've cheapened the work and say, no, you're just a paper pusher. Let's do the technology to do it. So I don't want to conclude that recruiters are lazy. I'm going to say the process that companies use to hire people is incorrect and inappropriate, and they hire recruiters to implement that process. And the problem is deeper than recruiters being lazy. They just don't have a good process for hiring.
I always look at the title of recruiter, and I find that many with that title don't truly recruit anymore as we would know it. And to your point, they're being put in a role to basically be administrative process operations people.
Yeah, they're paper pushers. It's a transactional process. So that's why I say there's 2 markets. There's one, the passive market. You spend more time with fewer people. It's understanding. And then you have the transactional job market. So one's a career market, one's a job market. And unfortunately, most people play in the job market, and they try to make that more efficient using technology. And I guess you can fill. So I think that's really the fundamental difference of why we have this lack of progress in recruiting. Is there's too much focus on hiring people for jobs rather than offering people careers.
Exactly right. It's like the rush order. It's just rush. We got to get this person hired because it's money for us. Head count.
It's a head count, money, fill jobs with whoever applies. It appears to be the most qualified, but then you look at the results. Hey, I didn't know I was going to take that job. So people just do their work and they're not very satisfied with it.
Too short-term focused.
So true.
You've been heavily involved in online discussions and webinars with respect to ChatGPT and how it can impact the recruiting process. I want to spend some time talking about that because I know that it's something you're investing a lot of time in.
Exactly. And let's put up the screen real quick here. I just want to see. Look at this.
Well, that's certainly a chart. Why don't you leave it up there for a minute? And I think if they can hear me. The real idea is, again, this goes back to it. I contend that 70% of all hiring is based on hiring people for jobs, which is what we talked about. 30% is for careers. And unfortunately, and this is a question I ask companies, I said, is the demand for top talent greater than the supply? And they all said, of course there is. The demand, we never have enough supply of good people. I said, well, then you can't use a weed out the weak process. Hopefully a good person will apply because those good people won't apply. You've got to attract them in, not weed them out. And so you can remove that chart, or we don't have to, but you can leave it up there. But the real idea is that if you want to offer people career, you got to spend more time with fewer people. It's much more personal. You have to be able to say to this candidate, don't make long-term decisions using short-term data. And then they say, why? I said, well, here's the work you're going to be doing. Here's the people you're going to be doing it with. And I actually say to candidates when I talk to them, let's assume it was Richard, hey, Richard, if we're going to go forward, we're going to give you all the information to make a long-term career decision. Part of that's, and most of it's going to be the work you're actually doing. Part of it's going to be the people you're doing with, especially the hiring manager. But you also have to see this company as a a place where you can make a long-term career move. When I talk long-term, I'm talking 3 to 4 years, maybe long-term, not much more than that. You also got to find a work-life balance, and the cultural fit's got to be there for you. That's going to take some extra time. But and before we make you an offer, if we do 3 or 4 weeks from now, I'm going to ask you this question. Forget the money. Do you want the job? And you have to be able to answer all of that. But we have the obligation to get you that information. And now it's a different kind of a pitch when I talk to candidates up front. This is a long-term decision. I'm not going to present a lot of candidates for this job. There's a high probability if I present you, you will get an offer, but we have to give you the information to make the right career move for you, not just one that pays the most.
100%.
Say that
and you
again.
know what I love about that, Lou? Real quick, what you said there, and John knows what I do. I don't recruit, I represent you. And that's what you just said. You represent that candidate, to the next level. I mean,
right, absolutely. But I want the candidates, when I first talk to them, I said, this is a long-term decision. And I tell people, if I'm going to present, I'm only going to present 3 or 4 candidates. So there's a high probability you will get an offer. I'm not ready to present you, but this is the information you have to do. So I tell people what's going to happen. And I said, it's going to be a long-term decision. I've made literally personally 600 to 700 placements. I've probably been involved in another 300 to 500. I can't think of any, and that's a bad statement. 90% of those, I didn't have the most money in the package. 10%.
But it sounds like, you followed a methodology which I embraced. It sounds like where, as a recruiter, you get to know your candidate, you understand their why, you understand what they're looking for, and you try to put them in positions to entertain opportunities that will fall in line with their career goals. And there is a lot of dialogue involved then. And I believe that's what leads to those deeper, more trusting, more long-term relationships between candidate and recruiter. Again, though, so many people nowadays, it's such a short-term satisfaction, immediate gratification society that they're just trying to go transactional, bang, 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 and move on, which to me makes it easier for you to stand out as a recruiter and potentially build better relationships.
Listen.
There's no question. But on the other hand, I've got to, and I say this to recruiters, we train a lot of recruiters, we train a lot of hiring managers. That's what I do now, is you'll never have enough money to hire everybody. The best people want the most money.
Right.
As long as the comp, and I tell candidates, as long as the comp is above the threshold, obviously it's got to be competitive. If you're in the bottom half, it ain't going to happen. But if top third, you're in the game. But it's what you make a year from now or 2 years from now that matters. So the career trajectory will get you more money as opposed to focusing on what you're maximizing in year one or day one. Focus on what you're going to maximize in year 1 and year 2. But it's all these other factors that impact your job success, satisfaction, and growth. And I think very few people consider that. On the other hand, companies and hiring managers have to give the candidates that information. That's not easy information to get. It's not just promises and hopes. It's real specific details. And I think that's where the fight is. I can get candidates to buy into that concept of thinking long-term, but you've got to get a company to provide that information so they can make a proper long-term decision. And that's just as big a battle as the other way around.
Agree, because a lot of companies aren't prepared because they haven't given it that much thought because they're just worried about getting the body in place.
Absolutely right. So it's a fight on both sides.
Right.
And that goes back to Richard's question is, why hasn't this worked? That's why.
Sums it up. Okay, so now you're ready for this. So the ChatGPT, is it going to replace recruiters, Lou? Come on, what's your take on all this?
Let's say this. I think it could.
That's a heavy statement. Wow.
I think it could. So I went in, I've placed a lot of people in engineering, manufacturing, marketing, sales, executive management. I haven't placed a lot of people at the software level position, and you'll understand why I'm saying this. I haven't done programming at all for 20, 30 years. Obviously you do it when you go to college, but in the olden days, but I decided, because I know some people in executive level who are running engineering teams. So I decided I think I'm going to become a software expert. So I went into ChatGPT, try to understand exactly what a mid-level software developer does on the front end or the back end. And in 24 hours, I understood that work inside out. I understood what drives success. how to sell it, how to find candidates. I always knew how to find candidates and talk to them, but now I could talk about the job. So from a practical, and I even knew how to leverage LinkedIn to get referrals for software developers. I even called a few people up and searched on them and said, what about this person? They said, great, this person. So I had candidates actually call me whom I don't know just because I mentioned somebody else that they knew. So then I'm thinking, I said, this is pretty powerful stuff. Normally I need 3 to 6 months to understand a subject or an industry and develop a network. I developed this in 48 hours. So now I'm a recruiter. But there's no reason why a hiring manager couldn't do that same thing. Why do you need to have a recruiter do all of this stuff? I can just go directly to the candidate. So I can use ChatGPT. I could see having now this is a pretty long way away, but I could see a hiring manager. Why do I need a recruiter to tell? I can do this myself. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I can say that as a recruiter, you can get in the game very, very quickly to go after recruiters in the passive candidate market. And if they don't want to do that, they're going to be dealing in the transactional process of old or the current transactional process. But I'm focusing on offering people career moves. And I think that ChatGPT can enhance that pretty profoundly.
It's almost almost Matrix-like the way that it provides information. I think back to, okay, give me the instructions on how to pilot a helicopter, and boom, it gets in there. It's impressive the way it's taken that, the prior generations of what is now known as ChatGPT were not as powerful, nor were they as knowledgeable, if you will. But it's pretty impressive technology. Very conversational in nature.
See, so there was somebody on LinkedIn yesterday who said, I'm trying to find candidates using ChatGPT. And what they're trying to do, and this is where and this is a recruiter. And I said, that's interesting. I said, but you're looking at it as enhancing what you're doing today, assuming what you're doing today is the right process. I'm saying, no, don't do that. Think about how would you find candidates if not in a new way, not the old way. So in my mind, it's who knows this candidate? How am I going to get a referral? So I said, how would I get a referral for mid-level software developer? And it goes right through chat. I said, now I still got to call these people up on the phone. But if your mindset is, how do I filter candidates using chat? That's the old way. I'm going to say, how do you do it the new way in the career market? And I think that's, again, where most people say, I'm going to use chat to be more efficient, ChatGPT. I said, no, why don't you use it to be different and better? But that's a mindset that if you don't want to think out of the box a little bit, you'll just use it and you'll complain that it's not really all that effective. But I'm going to say, no, let's think of it strategically to change the direction of where we're going.
And it reminds me, what I always try and tell folks is, the fundamentals of recruiting haven't changed in a long time, but as a recruiter, you have to evolve and adapt to the landscape if you are going to be competitive. And this is one of those areas. Why not embrace technology that can enhance the way you do business and move forward? Whereas, again, what got us here isn't always going to get us there, right?
No question about it. No, I think, and in fact, I saw somebody who's supposedly a futurist about recruiting. He said, be careful of it. No, embrace it and try it out. It's going to screw it up, but it doesn't mean you kind of just think differently about how do you use these technologies. So, I mean, I think I was the first recruiter in the world in 1980, which you guys, you might have been around then, but not old. And I bought a computer in 1980 and created the first database of recruiters, candidates.
Wow.
And it took, however, let me just tell you this. It was I think the memory was a tape recorder, and I had about 75 candidates on it. And it took to load them into the RAM like a half hour to get the 75 names. And I could look them up on my little Rolodex a lot easier than that. But it was a database of candidates that I used. So
the bottom line was you were thinking ahead.
Right.
Exactly. Okay, Lou.
That was slowly, right. But nonetheless.
So what computer was it? Was it the Radio Shack?
A Radio Shack Trash 80.
Oh my gosh.
Trash. Wow.
That was great.
Classic.
I remember the date because my son was, I think, 6, and my wife and my son all wanted a dog. I said, okay, you guys get a dog, I'll go get a computer. So I dropped them off at the pet store. They bought a dog. I went to the computer store, bought it. We went home and I played with my computer. They played with the pet dog. So I know it was sometime in, I think it was our anniversary in 1980 or so. But That's a memorable date.
I worked on Trash 80s in high school. That was what we had in our computer class.
Yeah, they were fun. I mean, that was pretty cool. I mean, I liked
At
that
the
stuff.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
no
Floppy
doubt.
disk. Wow, bringing back memories. All right, I still have the floppy disk from back in the day.
Oh, do you? I don't have it. I would like one, but they're different, right?
Now
Definitely
you
a
find them
different world.
framed on a wall, representing
That's it. So Lou, I got to ask you.
archives.
So recruiters right now, I call it the next gen recruiter. How do you get their mindset, like you're thinking right now, to change?
Well, let's say this. I think they have to go back to basics, and I think you said it, John. Why do good people change jobs, and how do they change jobs? So if you benchmark how the best people change jobs and how do I find these people? They say, okay, let me build a process on going after the best people, as opposed to building a process to fill jobs for people who are skills qualified. When you really look at the best people, what do they do differently? How do they change jobs? Usually, if you're in the top 25%, you probably got internal promotion, or if you decided to change jobs, you knew somebody. Hey, I worked with Richard 4 years ago. He's a project leader on this. And I called him, hey, Richard, I'm leaving jobs. And Richard said, I'm working on a new project. Let's talk. So a lot of this stuff on how the best people change jobs is because they know people. So then you say, okay, I got to build a network of people. So you start looking at, so if you ask the question is, how would I do it? Is I'd say, let's benchmark how the best people still change jobs today. What defines the best person? What's the criteria they use to change jobs? And then understand that and then apply that for all your other hiring processes to the degree possible. Not how average people change jobs for more money, but how the best people change jobs for career moves. So that's how I would start pulling it off.
That's great stuff.
Makes sense. So Lou, I got to ask you, you're the author, Hired with Your Head. What's it all about? I didn't get a chance to read it yet. So tell me a little bit about the book.
Well, so let me kind of give you the quick summary of it. I wrote the book in 1995 or 1996. It was after working with 20 years in recruiting. And at that time I truly lucked out at this as a recruiter. In 1990, my next door neighbor asked me, hey, Lou, do you want to speak to our business group? And it was, at the time it was called YPO or called Tech. It was both groups, and now called Vistage. And I said, yeah, sure. What is it? He knew I was a recruiter. I hadn't done any work with him, but me and two other guys, we made 400 presentations to company presidents from 1990 to 2000. It was just like this marketing, like the hen in the fox in the hen house. I had nothing to do with it. My next door neighbor introduced me to this group, and it took off. But the book itself took in, I'd say, 100 of those stories. We did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of search assignments based on that. And in the beginning of each of those presentations, and now I'm going back to your question, what the book's about, I asked these company presidents and company executives, how many of you want to hire a good person? They all say yes. I said, well, if you want to hire a good person, you better have a great job, not some laundry list of skills, experiences, and competencies, because no great person cares about that. That's a filtering system. And if you want to hire a great person, you have to define great work. So that became what is a great job. So we define that. Then we had the next part of the book is how do you find great people? They don't apply to boring jobs. Some of them might apply to good jobs, but most of them are going to be through networking. So you got to develop a deep network of candidates. Well, then you've got to be a good interviewer too. So that's the third part. You got to not only be able to assess candidates, but you also have to conduct an interview. Is this person competent and motivated to do this work? And would the person see the job as a career move? So you got to do both. You got to conduct this dual interview. These are good people. They expect you to know the job. They expect you to present the job as a career move. Then you won't have enough money in the budget. So that's the fourth part. You got to recruit and close these deals without enough money in the budget. And they will get a counteroffer because they're good. So you got to deal with all of that stuff. And they won't listen to you if you're a dirtball recruiter. So you got to persist and be a pain in the neck, but you got to be able to understand the job and the circumstances and close the deal based on career growth. That's what the book's about. All of those things. Bam. Everything we've talked about today.
And it's like you're on your fourth or fifth iteration of the book.
Fifth. One of them Wiley didn't want to do, but it's really the fifth edition. Wiley says it's 4, but there's actually another one, hidden one in there.
I thought I had seen a 5th edition.
Yeah.
Man. And is that you've been bringing it and updating it to?
Yeah. No, the 4th edition came out a year and a half ago. I had another one in between there called The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired, which said to candidates, hey, if companies don't do this, you do that. So it was kind of in every chapter I said, here's how to make sure that you get interviewed properly. Wiley didn't want to do a book that was to two audiences, both candidates and companies. So that we just did that through another publisher.
Gotcha. Great stuff.
Love it. Hey, Johnny, any final thoughts, my man, on our man Lou today?
If you haven't picked it up, Get Higher with Your Head. You can follow Lou. He'll tell you how to get in touch with him and how to follow him. You do a lot of stuff for the community, Lou. What I love about you is I totally respect your knowledge, your ability to transition with changing landscapes, and your passion is very evident. So, thanks for taking some time out. I'll draw people back. Let's be less transactional in our hiring and more career focused, and we'll still get where we want to go.
I guess my final words would be to candidates and companies alike, don't make long-term strategic decisions using short-term data. Now that's easy to say, but that's really the fundamental. You got to think long-term when you hire people. This is changing jobs is a life-changing situation, and most people trivialize it. And I think now implementing that change is not insignificant, but as a theme, that's really where people have to go. Think long-term, not short-term.
Love it.
There it is. Love it. Okay, Lou, my final question. Are you ever going to retire?
Well, I thought I would, and I don't work that hard. But this ChatGPT has got me motivated again. There's no, even some people who were on the last book club meeting we had said, boy, you seem real motivated. This is a game changer. I thought when LinkedIn Recruiter came out, that was a game changer. It still is if you know how to use it as a network, not a database. ChatGPT takes recruiting to another level. So it really gets you in the game very, very quickly. And people who embrace it will do well. People who don't, well, they're going to be left behind.
That's exciting.
There it is. Everybody out there, remember the tagline, hire with your head. Think.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Lou, thanks a lot, buddy. We'll see you next week. That's a wrap.
Success.